just want to acknowledge that Alderman Robin Simmons walked in, just in case you guys don't know her. She will be speaking tonight. This is the young black woman that executed the reparations in Evanston. Yes. So we're going to save that for last. Next, I want to bring to you, he's not a female, but he's speaking about a female. He's going to give us information about the role of Queen Mother Moore in the reparations movement. I'd like to introduce to you Dr., and I don't want to mess this name up, Akinyele Umoja. You did? Did I do it? Thank you. If I may just interject a little bit, I just want to give the audience just some information about you. You are from out of town. All right. He is currently a professor of African American Studies at Georgia State University. So he came here to be a part of this symposium to give his input. He's done a lot in his life. You look much younger than this paper states. But if you can just give us a little bit about your background so that the people can know exactly who you are and why you're bringing this message.
How's everybody here? Good. I'm a member of the Malcolm X grassroots movement and New African Peoples Organization. And in fact, our organization was one of the founders organizations of NCOBRA. We always start with free the land. 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 By any means necessary. It's good to see y'all be here. Just a little bit about me. As I said, I'm a founding member of both those organizations. As she mentioned, I'm a professor at Georgia State University. I had the opportunity to speak here a few years ago. Baba Conrad brought me here, and at that time, my book, We Will Shoot Back, Armed Resistance in the Mississippi Freedom Movement, we had a talk and a book signing. We had to have it on the resistance movement in Mississippi and Chicago, right? Because Chicago is nothing but northern Mississippi, exactly. Right? Right. And that's part of our reparations claim too. So as our good sister just talked about reparations, in Chicago, don't forget the reparations that you are owed from your ancestors in Mississippi and Alabama and Louisiana. Exactly. Y'all hear me?
All right.
All right. I won't say, I'll say a little bit more about me in the future or in this presentation. But I also want to thank Baba Conrad Worrell for inviting me here, certainly a pioneer in our reparations movement. I want to thank Cam Howard and the Chicago chapter of NCOBRA for also inviting me here and just for being in this good Carruthers Center. It's a good space, a sacred space for our people. And we're going to talk to you. How many in this room actually met or heard Queen Mother Moore speak? Only a few of us. And I actually had the opportunity, I don't just study Queen Mother Moore, I had the opportunity to know her. Now, if you see this photo right here, she's speaking in South Central LA at South Park. And I don't have a pointer, but you see a young man to the right of her with an afro. That was me. So the sister said I've been involved for a long time, you can see. I've been a long distance running the movement. And I met Queen Mother Moore in 1972. I was 18 years old. I just graduated from Compton High School. I grew up in Compton, California. And I got involved in a defense committee for a brother by the name of Max Stanford, Muhammad Ahmed. He was a member of the Revolutionary Action Movement. And so as I joined that group, someone asked me, had I ever heard of Queen Mother Moore? And growing up in most of our, as I would say, education systems, you don't know our true history. You're not taught about our heroes and sheroes, right? And so I'd never heard of Queen Mother Moore. And so the brother asked me to go to this event where she was speaking on our reparations. And this is in 1972. And at that point, I met Queen Mother Moore. And then whenever she came to Los Angeles, from that point on, I usually accompanied her. I would carry her bags, act like I was doing security. That's what I'm doing in this picture. I tell my students when I show them the photo, I'm not doing a good job of security though, because you're supposed to be looking at the audience, not the speaker, if you're doing security. But maybe they'll learn something from my mistakes. But I met Queen Mother Moore during that time. But who was Queen Mother Moore? We already heard about Callie House. Callie House is the mother of our reparations movement, right? And Queen Mother Moore, we say, is a modern day mother of our reparations movement. She was the foremost advocate of reparations throughout the 1950s, 60s, 70s, 80s, until she died in 1996. Queen Mother Moore was born in the South in New Iberia, Louisiana, 1898. And if you think 1898 in Louisiana, what were our people seeing? 1898. Historians call that period of time after Reconstruction as a nadir period. That's the low period in our history, right? We were being lynched. It was like a national pastime to lynch African people during that time. And so Queen Mother Moore grew up in Louisiana during that time. And so she was well qualified to talk about reparations. Her political awakening can be linked to her membership in the Universal Negro Improvement Association. Okay, she joined the organization in New Orleans, and she always would speak in any of her speeches. She would talk about when Garvey came to New Orleans, and the police were going to stop Marcus Garvey from speaking. If you ever heard Queen Mother Moore, she tells this story. And they were going to allow Garvey to come to the hall that night and tell folks that he wasn't going to be able to address them. So he came, the police is standing behind him, the police chief, the mayor, and he says, brothers and sisters, unfortunately, I won't be able to address you this evening. And then, as he says that, the hundreds of brothers and sisters who were there pull guns out. They didn't have metal detectors in those days. She said, Queen Mother Moore said she had a derringer in her bosom when she pulled a derringer out. And they shouted with their guns in the air, "Speak, Garvey, speak." And the police backed up. And Marcus Garvey walked to the podium and said, brothers and sisters, as I was saying, and then he continued his address that evening. That was the power of the Garvey movement. Oftentimes we think about the Garvey movement, we don't know that there were hundreds of chapters in Louisiana, Mississippi, and places like that, rural areas. My father was born in Bolivar County, Mississippi. They would have rallies of 1,500 people. We're talking about in the country for the Marcus Garvey movement during that time. And another thing to note, when we think of Callie House, it was mentioned the parallel. Most of the places where Callie House established her organization is where Marcus Garvey established his group in the South. It kind of springboarded from what Callie House did. So when we talk about women in the reparations movement, we got to recognize the role that Callie House did in providing that organization for Marcus Garvey to emerge. Queen Mother would move to Harlem. Like many of our people, we migrated north, refugees from our southern territory. And there, during that time, particularly after the repression against Marcus Garvey, where the FBI set him up on mail fraud, as was mentioned earlier, had him in prison in Atlanta and exiled from the United States, there weren't many organizations people could join. So Queen Mother Moore joined the Communist Party in Harlem during that time. It became one of their leading organizers. Here you see Ben Davis, who ran for city council and was the first black man to be city councilman in the city of New York. Queen Mother Moore ran his election campaign, getting people like Paul Robeson and others to be supporters of the campaign for Ben Davis to be elected to city council. Many of black people joined the Communist Party during that time because they had this position that black people in the South were a nation. And you see in this particular map during that time, the black portions of the map where black people were 50% or higher in the South during that particular time. And many people, like Queen Mother Moore, coming from the South, saw, well, yeah, we are a nation there, and we should have our reparations in our land there. But the Communist Party would abandon that position in the 1950s, and they began to support the civil rights movement, particularly for integration. And Queen Mother Moore was sort of disenchanted with that. You're talking about a woman who was a Garveyite, and she wasn't feeling that. She would leave the Communist Party, and she would form first an organization with other black women called the Universal Association of Ethiopian Women. Why do we say Ethiopian? Remember, most of us at that point are Christian. If we were looking in the Bible, where do you see black people? Ethiopia is one of the places we could identify. So a lot of people love that Ethiopian identity at that particular time. So she formed that organization. One of her associates from Louisiana, another Garveyite and child of Garveyites, Dara Bubakari, also known as Virginia Collins, was one of the members there. What did the organization do? One of the things they challenged was the legal lynching of black men. Okay, when they stopped lynching us in the street, then we were lynched in the courts. So this became really one of the first movements against mass incarceration, particularly of black men put on death row. And when we say black men put on death row, Queen Mother Moore, just like Ida B. Wells before her, identified that many of the charges of rape were false charges, oftentimes because people were politically active or just not being subservient to white folks. So that was one of the things they began to campaign on. But the other thing was reparations. And they were the first organization post-Callie House to promote the concept of reparations. She would later on form an organization called the Committee for Reparations for U.S. slave descendants. And here you see Queen Mother Moore working with other people on a grassroots level, but she also got professionals and intellectuals, but she also would organize black people on the grassroots level. In 1957 and 1959, she presented petitions to the United Nations demanding reparations. And in 1962, she would meet with President Kennedy, she would attempt to meet with President Kennedy on 1963, on the 100th anniversary of the Emancipation Proclamation. She felt it was important to meet with him so they wouldn't say, if the issue hadn't been raised and if there's 100 years had gone past and you ain't said nothing, then your statute of limitation is over. But that's why Barbara Conrad and them did what? They went to Durban, and in international law, it's a crime against humanity in terms of what's happening to us, so there is no statute of limitation. Ashe? She also became involved in the Crusader Network. If you know, in Monroe, North Carolina, you had one beacon organization or people who proudly proclaimed they were fighting against the Ku Klux Klan in 1957. And she and other people like John Henry Clark, John Oliver Killens, Malcolm X, and others formed this organization to support the movement for black self-defense in Monroe, North Carolina. Robert Williams, if you heard of him, was the leader of that movement along with his wife, Mabel Williams, and others. Ashe? Don't be afraid to salute our ancestors. If you heard of the Yoruba movement in the United States, Nana Osurjiman Adefume, who founded Oyatunji Village in South Carolina. When he was in Harlem, he and Queen Mother Moore would work together on several projects. one of the things they did in terms of reparations is they formed a group called the African Descendants National Independence Partition Party in 1964 that demanded all the land south of the Mason-Dixon line as reparations to be paid to African descendants. Okay, so she worked very closely with the Yoruba movement at that time, even though she wasn't particularly a member of the Yoruba faith. 1968, she founds the provisional government of the Republic of New Africa with Free the Land, with Imari Obadele, Gaidi Obadele, Betty Shabazz, and others. You see Nana Surgerman in the background. That organization was founded in Detroit, 1968, where there was a black government conference, and they decided to declare their independence from the United States of America and to found a new nation, the Republic of New Africa. Queen Mother Moore was the first signer of the Declaration of Independence. Not only that, she was the person who coined the phrase New Africa as the name of the nation. Here you see them meeting with Robert Williams, their first president, after he returns from exile in China. Queen Mother Moore right behind them, representing that strength. She also, as I mentioned, when I first met her, she became head of the defense committee for this man, Max Stanford, Muhammad Ahmed. She was always in support of dealing with people who are incarcerated, political prisoners, and just our people in general. Queen Mother Moore would tell us, we can't steal nothing from the white man stole us.
Exactly.
So she said, brothers, you're not criminals. Okay, but she always tied the question of reparations to freeing our people who've been incarcerated. She always tied that question. And if you think about it, particularly with our political prisoners, how can we say we've gotten repaid and we still got soldiers, warriors, behind the walls, locked up or in exile, like Assata Shakur can't come home? How can we say we got reparations and Assata can't come home? Y'all feel me? All right, so don't forget that. Queen Mother Moore inspired the founding of this organization, N'COBRA. In fact, at the first meeting of N'COBRA, one of the rituals that occurred was a relay race where they had the youngest person who was there start the relay. Ended the relay, but it was started with Queen Mother Moore, who was taken around in a wheelchair to do the first lap. So she's a founding member of the N'COBRA conference and is really a part of this organization. So when my brother, comrade Chokwe Lumumba said at a rally in Washington, D.C. in the 90s, he said, we are the children of, he said, Malcolm X, and Queen Mother Moore. So when we think about it, those of us who are Pan-Africanists, out of that Marcus Garvey tradition, she was that transmission belt, right? Those of us who are black nationalists, she was that transmission belt. Those of us who are a part of this new African independence movement, Queen Mother Moore is that transmission belt, that elder. Those of us who are in N'COBRA and in this reparation fight, we owe allegiance to one of our esteemed ancestors, Queen Mother Moore. So we have to never forget her. Let me just leave with a couple of things she would say. For her, reparations wasn't just about what we were going to reclaim from the government. It was about reclaiming us, making sure we reclaimed our minds.
Exactly.
And so she said that about our identity, you know, a lot of times we question identity, even in the reparations movement. Some people say that we are American, whatever, I forgot what the term is. And she said, would always say, if a cat had kittens in the oven, would you call them biscuits? That was something that Malcolm would say also. And so in other words, she said, if Africans are born here, then they're still Africans.
Exactly.
And so that's what Queen Mother Moore would always argue. She would also say that black people suffer from something she called oppression psychoneurosis. And some of y'all might not remember this, the young folks in the audience, but when I was young, we would go to the circus, And they would have this thing where a lion would be so damn trained that a man could stick his head into the lion's mouth. And Queen Mother Moore would say that Negro is just like that damn lion. Because we have been so denaturized that we've been taken from our natural element. And usually they would have a little white girl stick her head in the lion's mouth, like I have on the right. And Queen Mother Moore said if that lion was in his true self, he would have snapped her head off. I know that's gruesome for y'all today, but we loved it back when Queen Mother Moore used to say that. So she was saying that's one of the elements of reparations. And it's something the government can't give us.
No.
But we got to give ourselves. We got to reclaim our African identity. We got to reclaim our heritage. And we have to start by what's happening here tonight is uplifting the heritage of our mothers who are in this fight. And so we say we are the sons and daughters of Queen Mother Moore. I'll end right there. Ashe. 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 Free the land. Free the land. Free the land. By any means necessary.
I hope you're all taking notes. See, when I was in high school, history was not my favorite subject. It was my least favorite subject. I just couldn't get into Christopher Columbus and all this other stuff they talk about. So I focused on business. I wanted to learn how to type and do shorthand and how to run a corporation. I wanted to know where the money was hidden. But the more I get into reparations, the more I'm interested in history. So I feel like I was robbed as a teenager. I should have known this history a long time ago. So make sure your children, because my children are too old, they're all out of college now, but make sure your children are learning Black history. It's important. If we don't know where we come from, how can we know how to get to the next level where we need to be?